certain video games just look like video games. And I realize that's kind of a ridiculous statement, but as graphics inch closer and closer toward closing the uncanny valley and production values continue to skyrocket, games have become less identifiable on their faces. Games don't look like games anymore. It wasn't always this way. Tempest is a game that looks like an iconic game. And that's because it's an iconic game. Back in '81, when games were beginning to infiltrate the pinball-dominated parlors of the time, Atari was one of the biggest names on the block. It didn't take much to stand out in those days, and by today's standards, Tempest isn't much. Some vector graphics, no music, staticky sound effects. But that's judging it by today's standards. The point is to appreciate a game that was groundbreaking in its time, and from that, seeing where games have taken these concepts. First off, Selectable Difficulty. I realize it's an arcade game and sucking up quarters is the modus operandi of the medium, but not everyone's ready to be dropped right into a game where the angles of the stage further obfuscate a gameplay concept that's alien to the average player. The dial controls could take a little bit of getting used to, and having a couple gimme stages at the beginning allows players to ease into the madness. And madness it is. Not many people realize just how fast some of these old arcade machines could get. Fortunately, you've got that handy rewind button in case things get a little too hairy. Second, the graphics. Vector games had been done, but never with this much color. When all you've got are some lines against black, the whole thing is its own kind of striking. At the time, it was revolutionary, even though those vector systems would fall out of favor once the industry figured out how to make sprites work better. But sprites couldn't create the kind of geometry that Tempest thrived on, the pseudo-3D effect that sinks each shot into the middle of the screen and makes for some really cool warps between stages. So long as you watch out for spikes. And it's this mode of display that itself helped contribute to the difficulty of the game. Some levels have angles that, from the player's vantage point, can be difficult to interpret, thus going back to the selectable difficulty discussion. From the first stage, a simple circle, or as close to a circle as you're going to get with those mechanics, you have a very clear view of every hostile squiggle, box, and swirl rising up from the depths. Later stages present some viewing challenges, though, like the sides near the bottom of this particular figure. It's a study in perspective, and a whole lot more interesting than that droning soulless automaton in your art class. You have to know where you come from to know where you're going. Just as vector games shifted the paradigm of the early 1980s, they were shifted back out again just a few years later. But that image, an arcade cabinet, brightly colored lines, imposing side artwork, a player frantically slapping the fire button, that's where we've come from. And compared to the rather distressing idea of a kid at home shouting obscenities into his headset and teabagging a corpse, well, I know which picture is more appealing. The one that looks like a game.